This PowerPoint is on usability testing. We are now at the final step of our course project, usability testing. So let's take a look at what usability testing is. It's basically about evaluating a product or service by testing it with representative users. So what that means is that usability testing is about trying to find out how good your prototype is by testing it with your target users. Okay, so during this test, your participants, the people that will test your prototype, will try and complete typical task while observers watch, listen, and take notes. So during this test, you are going to get the classmates who have been assigned to you to test your prototype according to the task that was described in your task analysis, while you, your team, watch, listen, and take notes on the actions and behaviors and attitudes as that user is completing the task. So you have to watch quite closely. So the goal here is to identify any usability problems, collect qualitative and quantitative data, and determine whether your participant is satisfied with your prototype. Okay, so why do we perform usability testing? What are the benefits of usability testing? Well, it lets the design and development team identify problems before they're coded. So before we go into coding your app or website and adding all the fine details to it, the usability testing allows you to see big problems that are glaring before you get to the coding stage. And once you get to code it, it becomes a lot more work to have to change things about it. Okay, so the earlier the issues are identified and fixed, the less expensive the fixes will be in terms of both the staff time and possible impact to the schedule. So in a usability testing, the benefits are that you get to learn if participants are actually able to complete the specified task successfully as you have laid them out. Okay, and you can also identify how long it actually takes to complete the specified task. You can find out how satisfied participants are with your website or your app. You can identify changes that are required to improve user performance and satisfaction. So maybe some assumptions that you had made or things that you had not noticed, these will come to light during your usability testing. So you have to keep your eyes peeled. You have to really watch for imperfections. You have to really watch for flaws. Okay, this is where you have to be really objective and actually critical of your own work. Okay, so the biggest mistake you can make is to convince yourself that you have already designed the best design ever and there's nothing wrong with it. So that is the worst thing that you can do as a designer, is to have that bias and to believe that your own work is so great. Okay, so in the first round of prototype, nobody's prototype is going to be good. Okay, it's all going to have flaws, and what's important here is that you conduct a very good usability testing. In a good usability testing, you are able to find out the mistakes that were made or the assumptions that were wrong or things you had not noticed. So if you perform a good test, you will be able to find these things out. If your testing is not a good test and it's not strong enough, then you will not be able to find these things out and they will go unnoticed. Okay. So the purpose of usability testing is to analyze the performance to see if it meets your usability objectives. Okay. So next we look at planning a usability test. So in the planning, you're going to look at what you're going to do. Okay, what is it exactly that you're going to test? How are you going to conduct the test? What metrics you're going to capture? The number of participants you're going to test, and what scenario you're going to use. Okay, here I have it in plural because most usability testings have more than one scenario, but in our case, we just have one scenario. Okay, so the elements of the test plan is then to have a scope. What are you testing for? Purpose. Why are you testing? What are you trying to find out? A schedule and location, when and where. The sessions, how long they're going to be, how they're going to take place. Equipment, what are you going to use? Participants, who is going to be your participants, metrics, and roles. So I'll talk about metrics in more detail and roles as well. So when it comes to metrics, there is subjective metrics and quantitative metrics. So subjective metrics are questions you're going to ask. It may include questions you're going to ask participants prior to the session. So it might be a background questionnaire. It might be very short. For example, have you used Compass Card before? Or, when's the last time you used it? Okay, so it has to be consistent for every participant. Okay, and then questions after the scenario is completed. Ease and satisfaction about the task. You can just ask them overall, how did they feel about it? Okay, and you're also going to ask about overall ease, satisfaction, and likelihood to use or recommend it. Questions when the session is complete. Okay, next is quantitative metrics. Indicate the quantitative data that you'll be measuring in your test. So these would be the metrics that you have identified that you're going to test. So for example, successful completion rates, is that something you're going to look for? Error rates and the time on task, how long it takes to perform the task. So those are quantitative metrics. Okay, so test metrics are things such as successful task completion. Was the user able to complete the task successfully without you having to step in and help them? Were they stuck somewhere? Did they look at you or kind of put their hands up and say, I don't know why this is not working the way it should be? Okay, so don't be embarrassed or try and cover it up if your participant or user is not able to successfully complete a task. This is actually what you're looking for. When you're able to come across such a scenario is actually a good thing, because then you're able to find out a flaw. Okay, the worst thing in the usability testing is that you're not able to find out any information that would be useful to you. You're not able to find out when something is wrong. Okay. Anyway, so there's also critical errors and non-critical errors. So what is a critical error? Leave that to you. Go into your readings. And find out the difference between critical errors and non-critical errors. Those are things you should note. What is the error-free rate? What is the time on task? What are the subjective measures? So other subjective measures like likes, dislikes, and recommendations. Okay, so I urge you to go to your readings and that all these things, all these test metrics are covered in that, and make sure you cover that in your usability testing as well. Okay, next is the roles. Make sure that you have clear roles in your group. There may be 3 or 4 of you. Include a list of who is going to participate and what role each person will play. The usability specialist should be the facilitator of the session. Who is going to be that? Might be the group rep. The usability team may be able to provide the note-taking. Okay, and other team members can be participating as observers or note-takers, picking up things that might be missed. Okay. Next is about reporting usability test results. Okay, so make sure that you keep the sections short, use tables to display the metrics, and use visual examples to demonstrate problem areas where possible. At the end of usability testing, you'll have collected several types of data depending on the metrics that you have identified in your test plan. When analyzing this data you've collected, read through your notes carefully and look for patterns or trends. Okay, very important. Look for patterns. I'm going to highlight that here. Look for patterns and make sure you add a description of each of the problems. Okay, don't just state what the problem is. Describe it in specific detail. Okay. I would like you to enter the data into a spreadsheet to record data and make calculations such as success rates, task times, error rates, and satisfaction of questionnaire ratings. Add your participants' demographic data so you can sort by demographics. In this case, it might not make too much of a difference because we're obviously, all the students are in the same age group. If you would like to make it gender specific, you could, but we're testing such a small sample that it wouldn't really be significant statistically. But just note that in a real usability testing, demographic data is something that you look at and add. Okay, so next, record data related to observations about pathways participants took. Record like think about every step that they took. Did they stray from the, task analysis that you had mapped out? You had assumed that, your user would take a certain path to get to where they wanted to go. Did they actually take that path? What did they do differently? What are the problems they experienced because they took that different path? Did they have comments or recommendations? And what are their answers to open-ended questions if you have them? Next, make sure that your problem statements are exact and concise. For example, a good problem statement, one that you would write. So if you wrote this in your report, this is good, and I'll give you good marks. If you said something like, clicked on link to research instead of clinical trials. So if they clicked on research link instead of clinical trials, that is interesting. Okay, so that is a good problem statement. This is what you want to say. So for example, if they clicked on about instead of contact, okay, that's something you want to state. So a poor problem statement is if you said clicked on wrong link. So that doesn't really explain anything, okay? So that's not specific, and it's not helpful. So wrong link, meaning which link did they click on? What link should they have clicked? Why did you think it was wrong? So don't ever write something like this in your report, clicked on wrong link. Also, another bad example is was confused about the links or was confused about the navigation. So that is also a very bad statement, and you will have marks taken off for that. It's not clear, it's not specific. So what's good here is clicked on this link instead of that link. And then you want to go in to explain that they should, you were expecting them to click on clinical trials because you assumed that it was obvious. Or, explain your assumption, explain what you were expecting them to do instead. Okay? Next, you want to report on the severity levels of problems. So there's, different problems that you might encounter people having, and you want to talk about how severe that problem is. It might be critical, serious, or minor. Critical meaning if you don't fix this problem, users will not be able to complete the scenario. It is a game changer, okay? Serious means many users would be frustrated. If you don't fix it, they may give up, or they may keep trying. They may somehow fumble upon the right path and get to where they need to go. So it's serious, but there's a zero possibility that they might be able to complete their task. Next is minor. Users are annoyed, but it doesn't keep them from completing the scenario, okay? So if they click around enough, maybe they, are able to find it's a bit annoying for them, but they would still be able to get past that obstacle. But this should still be changed if you have time. But you want to identify if it's a critical issue, serious issue, or minor issue when they come across problems. Okay, so now it comes time to write the usability test report. You want to have a background summary, the methodology, the test results, and the findings and recommendations, something that's very similar to your user research report, right? So in the background summary, you want to talk about what you tested. Was it a website or a web app? Was it a kiosk? Where and when the test was held? Equipment information, what you did during the test, okay? And it can include all the testing materials in the appendix. Who the testing team was, the roles and responsibilities, and a brief description of the problems encountered, as well as what worked well. So the problems encountered as in your team when you're conducting this usability testing. What was good, what went wrong. Obviously, you all have to use Zoom. You can't have somebody in front of you. So talk about that and talk about what worked. Were you able to record it? What did you learn from your research when you conducted your research earlier on in the semester? What did you learn from that problem that you were able to apply here? Okay, maybe you decided to use Zoom in a different way or decided to use a different application to record it. So what was learned there? What did you apply here? Okay, so next is methodology. Include the test methodology. There's those 4 methods that I had posted in the other readings, so check those out and talk about which one you used. Explain how you conducted the tests by describing the test sessions, the type of interface tested, metrics collected, what metrics were you looking for, and an overview of the task scenario. So usually there'll be more than one, but in your case, there's just one task scenario. So give an overview of that. You can include the script of it, whatever it is that you're prepared to tell your users. Next, you describe the participants and provide summary tables of background, demographic, questionnaire responses, for example, age, professions, internet usage, site visited, and so on. Okay, so even though we're all in the same demographic, all the students would be in the same age demographic, like other factors might vary, right? Maybe they, for example, if you're testing a compass cart, maybe many of them have never taken the bus before, or they're new to Vancouver, things like that. So those things you can still ask, and there might still be a difference in the group. Then you want to provide brief summaries of the demographic data, but do not include the full names of the participants. So obviously I know who is going to be in your test group, but in the real case scenario, I'm just trying to get you prepared for when you conduct research outside of this class. In a real world situation, you would not include the full name of participants. You can, refer to them as subject 1, 2, 3, 4, or you can give them fake names, or you can just refer to them by their first name. You just don't want to make them identifiable. Okay, then next, the test results. So include an analysis of what was recorded. Depending on the metrics you collected, you may want to show the number and percent of participants who completed each scenario, the average time taken to complete each scenario, the satisfaction results, and participant comments can be included if they are helpful. Okay, so list your findings and recommendations using all your data, quantitative and qualitative notes and spreadsheets. So every finding you have should have a basis in data. So if you think that, you should change your about link to contact us, don't just make that, finding. Relate it to what it is that you saw and heard in the data, in the metrics that you had collected that you're claiming this statement. Okay, so although most usability test reports focus on problems, remember that it's also important to report positive findings. So maybe there are some assumptions that you made. You were expecting, your subject to kind of, choose A instead of B, and they did choose A. So that's maybe, something that you assume, and it is true. So maybe you want to talk about as well. You don't just only talk about mistakes. You can talk about things that went well, but I don't want something like, our prototype was very good. We had a very good task analysis. No, so that's not good. I want specific information, just like in the example that I gave you, instead of saying the user was confused or the user clicked on the wrong link. So now instead of saying the user clicked on the correct link or the user was happy, I want you to say the user clicked on clinical trials instead of research, which is what we expected. Okay, so say it in a very specific way. Do not say it in a general way. Okay, so if you include statements like our users were very happy, they're very satisfied, our prototype was very good. So those statements do not mean anything in the usability testing. They have to be supported by hard evidence and hard research data. Okay, so do not make general statements like that. It will not be marked. It does not add to the marks of your assignment. Okay, so next, the findings should include as specific a statement of the situation as possible. So that was what I was talking about. And each finding or a group of related findings should include recommendations on what to do. So if you found that this link was not used correctly, people clicked on clinical trials instead of research, then now the next step is to think about, okay, what is it that your group needs to do with the next iteration of the prototype so this does not happen? Okay, so something specific. So maybe you will take out the link clinical trials completely. Okay, so out of the main navigation. So I need you to state a hard fact, a hard recommendation, something specific and solid that you're actually going to do based on your findings. Okay.